Welcome to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons, the podcast where we cut through the noise and share strategies that actually drive customer-led growth. Each week, we bring you straight-talking conversations on adoption, retention, expansion, and everything in between. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. I'm Jason Noble here in a very grey and miserable-looking London, joined as always by my co-host, my brilliant friend, and occasionally rebellious Jason Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
Today we're gonna dive into a topic that I think is really close to home for anyone who's ever tried to be hired, and I think that's most of us, or tried to hire, because there are some challenges that flip to both sides. And we're talking about something that really says a lot about what companies do, how they really operate, not just how they claim to value and what they claim to do. And so today's episode is all about how poor hiring experiences can really erode trust long before customers feel it. And it really is no different to a customer journey when you're coming into an organization, and so many businesses lose that momentum. We know the experience is broken, you get ghosting, there's messy interviews, no feedback, but the real story that we're going to dig in today is how that experience, it impacts what people think about you as a business, and how it impacts your culture and ultimately customers. And to dig into this, we are thrilled to bits to have a guest with us, the one and only Annette Franz. Annette is a globally recognized thought leader, author of Customer Understanding, Built to Win, and her latest Employee Understanding book. She's the founder and CEO of CX Journeys Incorporated, where she helps customers build value-driven cultures that empower employees and deliver exceptional customer experiences. She's written some great articles about the whole experience, the onboarding experience for candidates, and we had to get her on here. This is something that I've seen a lot myself. I know friends who've seen this, and I think what Annette's done and her work around culture, employee experience, and customer experience, all as one ecosystem, is super, super important. Annette, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. So the good news is that I can just say Jason and somebody's going to answer, and I don't
Exactly.
need to remember both
Yeah.
of your names.
It's
I
all about the
love it.
guests. We just make your life
Yeah.
so easy.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation for
Let's,
sure.
Annette, I want to start with a question for you. Your article about the candidate experience being
Yeah.
broken. What do you mean by that, and where do you see it breaking down most?
Oh goodness, where to begin, right? So I think the first thing that we need to do, and I like to start with definitions a lot of times, is what is the candidate experience and when does it start, and I think that a lot of people don't even think that this candidate experience starts until you've submitted your resume or you've got the interview scheduled or whatever, right? I think it really starts before then. Just like with when we think about employee experience and customer experience, the experience actually starts when you have that need and you start to do a lot of different things, right? And that need is, at this point, it's I need a job. I either have a job and I need
Mhm.
another job, or I don't have a job and I need to, find a job. And so with that need comes a lot of things. And that is the research that we do, the job postings we read. And there's a lot of different touch points that, potential candidates or potential employees, um, different ways that they touch your brand, right? And so I think that's where the pain begins. The pain really begins with some of these job postings that are. I just actually was talking. We talked before we started recording about my oldest son looking for work, and he just told me last night that he had seen a job posting that he had applied to a year ago, and it's still
Mhm.
there. So it's still live, active posting, right? So there's a lot of those kinds of things where for candidates, the pain begins that early. It's like, is this a real job? Is this a real posting? Are they really going to, is this a mandate where you have to post, but you're going to promote or hire somebody internally? Those kinds of things. So that's where the pain begins. And then, it continues from there. So I think it's really important that people understand where the candidate experience begins and that the pain starts there.
I think it does it. And people don't think about this generally. I mean, on either side, you know, the first a candidate often sees is that ad, like you say.
Yeah.
And I've seen, I mean, even here, you get roles that are advertised. It talks about the perks or the compensation packet,
Right.
and
Right.
what they try and push is how great they are to give you the legal minimum. And it's
Yes.
that's a selling point, but
Yeah.
they're not thinking it through, and it's but
Yeah.
I think it has such a big impact because there are some of these organizations where one day we might be customers or we'll be talking about them.
Yes.
You know, if we're going to be saying, well, they don't know what they're doing, it doesn't, that advocacy is already being lost and we might not be a customer. We just might have had some interaction with them. Why do you think it is? I mean, do you think, because it's not, you've written about this a few times and some quite a while back. So it's not shift. It's not
Right.
always been a problem, but it's not always not been a problem. What do you think's changed recently that's kind of made it as bad as it is really and prompted you to write again?
Mhm.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that this morning too when I looked at an older article that I'd written,
Yeah,
maybe 5 years ago, pretty much about the
yeah,
same thing. And
Mhm.
and I think right now it's the economy, it's AI. I think AI is a huge factor right now, and it's really freaking people out, and people are losing their jobs. Um, as a result of it, or we could probably talk about that as well, but there's
Yep.
implications there. But I think what we're seeing is the economy, and we're also seeing, this is interesting, like some of the big players are laying off thousands and thousands of people because what they did during COVID was, well, or
yeah,
after COVID or during that time,
Mhm.
overhire, right? And now they're adjusting and bringing, right sizing, I guess, for a lack of a better word. And so now more people are out looking for work because there have been more layoffs and stuff. The economy, the government layoffs and the shutdowns and all of those kinds of things are all factors in why there's more people out there looking for jobs, and why the situation is that much worse, because there's a pool that we're looking at that really wants a job, and they're fighting hard to get a job, and they're all fighting for the same few jobs that are out there. So I think that's a huge factor. From the business side of things, I think the factors are, obviously the same factors, but I think that um they're not doing a really good job of cleaning out old postings. They're not doing a good job of, when they are
Mhm.
actually, hiring and recruiting, and in that process, they're just, and we can talk about this because this is where a lot of the pain happens, but they're just not handling it very well. And to your point, as consumers, we think about all of our experiences with a brand, and we think about all of the people around us and their experiences with a brand when we go and potentially buy or whatever it is. And so I think there's a lot going on there.
I mean, it really is fascinating because there are so many different dynamics, and you mentioned about, you know, there is this big pool of candidates now. AI's in there. You've got applicant tracking systems, and it's kind of all coming together and making it all worse. But I know from like I say, I know a lot of people in the recruitment industry, great people. And one of the challenges they've got is if they advertise a role, within minutes, they'll have hundreds of resumes, CVs to go through, and the vast majority are not relevant at all. You know, people talking about
Sure.
sponsorship, visas, and that makes their job even harder, gives
Yeah.
them less time to spend on it, and you can see the want to, how do I make this more efficient? I'm going to use AI to help me do this. And then when you use AI completely for it, and candidates are doing the same thing, CVs are all AI, everyone's chat GPT. It's AI, it's machine versus machine.
Exactly. Good
But
way to
it's
put it.
taken the human out of it almost, that initial
Yes.
application process, which is really scary, really,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
work and culture is all about relationships. You know,
Yeah.
I'm employed as me to deliver something, and you trust that I can deliver it. So this is the whole landscape is changing, and I do
Yeah.
for like your son. I said about my daughter as well, but it's quite scary thinking about them coming into this, and
Yeah.
You know, if you're a graduate or with a couple of years experience, how do you navigate this?
Yeah. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum, because I'm hearing a lot about this too, is ageism, right?
Yep.
So you've got
Mhm. Oh yeah.
30, 40 years of experience and they don't want to pay. They don't, they want to bring in some young folks who are not going to, ask for the same level of salary, but then they don't have the experience. And so that's a challenge as well. And then there's there's those job postings that ask for 10 years of experience for a product or a software that's only been around for 5 years, kind of thing.
Right.
So
So
yeah, it's a challenge. It really is. Absolutely. And you make a lot of great points there. So I think, yeah, there's a lot that can be done in terms of the candidate experience and what brands can do and what candidates can potentially do as well.
So Annette, I was loving your article as well too, and I'm curious because I haven't seen someone make the connection before between the candidate experience and the customer experience,
Right.
and how what you do in the early stages of hiring or throughout the process can really impact down the road. Can you walk us through your ideas there and what you've seen and what people need to be thinking about today?
Yeah, it came about it was probably about 10 or more years ago. I remember seeing a job posting for, I think it was Pier One. I can't remember who it
Hmm.
was. I think it was Pier One. And it was an email that went out to their customers that basically said, "Hey, you love the brand. We love you as our customers. Come work for us, if you're,
Hmm.
so I was like, "Oh, there's an interesting story, but that can also hurt you on the flip
Right.
side, right? Because yeah, as a in a couple of different ways, right? So if you're a customer and you're having bad experience as a customer, you certainly don't maybe you don't want to go work for these people, right? But as a customer who loves the brand, you're like, and I've heard plenty of stories like that where people are like, I want to go work for, I want to go work for Trader Joe's. I love shopping there. I want to go work for Costco because I love shopping there, whatever. But for the folks who are out there job searching and they go through this process and they start to see some of the inner workings of the company and they're not, their
Right.
processes are falling apart in front of you, you're like, wait a second. First of all, your culture seems really messed up. Your processes seem broken. How what do we see in here when we're buying from you? And so it really, as a candidate, you start to see some of those inner workings, and it really makes you question what's happening within the company and how they're able to survive, actually.
Hmm.
So that was really sort of the thinking there was, and then you walk away from that and go, okay, well, now I've seen that, and now I've either had a great recruiting candidate experience or I've had a crappy one, which seems to be the case more often than not right now. You know what? Yeah, I don't want to spend my money there. I don't want to give them, my share of wallet. They treated me like
Hmm.
crap, right? So that
Yeah.
was sort of the thinking behind that.
I really like that as well too. And I hadn't heard of the Pure One example. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I also could see where, what you, like you say, when you first touch the company as the candidate, but even through the onboarding piece, every step of the way, they're reinforcing their cultural norms.
Yep.
This is what we expect of our employees. This is the behavior that's okay. And when I look back at some of the jobs that I've taken over the years and some of the experience, I'm like, wow, the warning signs were there early on that this was not going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so I think there's some definitely education there about, like you're saying, do I want to be an employee for this company and then down the road be a customer? And I think that more folks don't make that connection. And I think they do so at their peril.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that that's part of the onus of the candidate when it comes to the candidate experience is to actually vet the company, right? Is this
Yeah.
really, are you out there just doling out your resume and filling out applications just because you can and there's a job opening or whatever? Or do you really want to work for this company, right? Have you done your homework? Is that a culture
Hmm.
that fits you? Like, do they live the core values that you live? Is it a good fit for you and is a good fit for the company, right? And I think that right now, just because of desperation or whatever, I mean, and I don't fault anybody for that, you go through this process and some of that onus is on you because you didn't take the time. You just said, hey, I'm just getting my resume out. I just need a job. Fair,
Yeah,
fair enough,
absolutely.
but
Yep.
we've
We've
all
all been
been
there at some
there.
point. So
Exactly.
it makes it really difficult, doesn't it? Because you've got the balance of people looking for work.
Yeah.
They need a role, and yes, they get don't send out hundreds of CVs, but it's easy to do.
Yeah.
And you can use AI to help a bit. You've got that versus spend time, customize your application. That takes time. And you know, when you're balancing that with I need a paycheck, it can be really tough,
Yeah.
really difficult. Where do you think, or if we look at ownership, we've talked about processes and the experience, where does ownership of this experience sit in an organization? Is it HR? Is it your CEO? And why is it not obvious to someone? I mean, I've seen some recent examples where going through an application that needed, you know, leadership positions, needed lots of experience, and I've seen this more than once. Can you confirm that you're over 18 years old? And you just smile,
Yeah.
but as no one tested it, it's
Right.
and also you get add into it. You get
Yeah.
a lot of organizations use third-party platforms for recruitment, but do they not test it?
Yeah.
So I'd love to.
Yeah.
What do you think about ownership? You know, where does the ownership of it all lie, and why is it as bad as it is? How has it got this bad?
Yeah, ultimately it is the CEO, because that CEO is building the culture that this process, this experience resides on, right? So rests on. So if you have a culture where you're going to treat people well, you're going to put people first, you're going to communicate, you have all the right core values in place to make sure that this process doesn't break down. So I ultimately think that's where it's there. That's where it begins. That's where everything begins, right? That is the foundation of your
Mhm.
organization.
Yep.
It's the foundation of everything you do. And that's been the message that I've been trying to get out for the last several years, is that culture is the foundation. Once we move beyond that, then I believe the candidate experience resides with HR. And I don't believe employee experience resides with HR, but I do believe that the candidate experience resides with HR, because um, these are their processes. These are their touch points.
Mhm.
This is the work that they're doing. This is what they've been entrusted with to bring the right people on board and hire for the organization, to build the organization. So that's where I believe that sits.
You
That's
mentioned
awesome.
a very interesting comment there about you don't think employee experience
Yeah.
sits there. But
Yeah.
if you're a candidate coming in, you go from that initial experience, then you've got
Yeah.
onboarding. You know, you're like a customer. There's an onboarding process. Does that not sit with HR?
So onboarding is it, well, there's an interesting one too,
Mhm.
because it sort of crosses over. So when I think, I'll kind of step back and I'll address that. When I think about employee experience, I believe the employee experience starts with the candidate experience. But I also believe that HR does not own employee experience, because HR, even though it stands for
Mhm.
human resources, is really not about the human.
By the company.
It's it's about benefits, it's about recruiting, it's about performance reviews, and those comp and benefits kind of things, right? So that's what they're focused on. The person who is looking at the employee experience, whether it's the head of people and culture, it's the VP of employee experience, they've got that whole umbrella of the entire life cycle of the employee, and that, yes, starts back with the
Yep.
candidate experience. And so onboarding sort of sits right smack in the middle of that, but I would put that on both HR and the person who runs employee experience, because you need to set the right tone for what lies ahead. But here's the problem though. Too many companies don't do onboarding. They think
Yep.
orientation and onboarding are the exact same thing, and they're not. It's so funny. This takes me back to, oh my goodness. I wrote an article, this was probably 15 years ago, and it happened to be syndicated onto Business to Community. And I got lambasted by a woman who said, "You're introducing new words. What is onboarding? We don't need to talk. We don't need to talk about, why are you talking about onboarding?" It was like, wait a second. I mean, this was 15 years ago. What,
Wow.
Oh,
wait a second. So a lot of companies don't even do onboarding because they don't understand that orientation and onboarding are two very different things. Orientation is,
Hmm.
maybe a day of, hey, here's your comp and benefits and, all those kinds of things. But onboarding could be like a 90-day or longer process. And so, so I think that's funny. And I think that's where,
Hmm.
it really falls down, is companies don't spend the time
Sure.
with that onboarding. And onboarding actually resides with your manager, I think, more so than it does with HR orientation,
Hmm.
onboarding your manager and making sure that you're equipped to do a great job going forward. And again, if you have a VP of employee experience or whoever's overseeing
Hmm.
employee experience, which again, not a lot of companies have that, they're gonna take a look at end to end and make sure that
You
person.
would hope, at least. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I've worked with for some, big companies over the years, Fortune 100s, and the federal government, which was just a colossal experience in its own right. But even when I was either a hiring manager or someone who was interviewing potential candidates as part of the hiring process, no one had ever instructed us or trained us around creating a great onboarding experience or a great hiring experience. So it was all new to me. It's like, oh, let me see if they're a good fit. Let me see if they have the skills and those sort of things. So I think that might be an area of a potential gap as well. But what I'd really love to hear from you is, I'm sure you've seen it all in your time, from absolutely horrible practices that should be shameful, to wow, this is best in class. What are the things that people should be striving for, and how can you come in if you're assessing an organization, say, yep, you've got it together, or you got a lot of work to do? What do you look for there?
Yeah, for me, I start with the culture. I'll just
Hmm.
sit there for a minute. That is where I start. So when I go in and first start working with the company, I will interview the entire leadership team. I'll interview a sampling of
Hmm.
employees and a sampling of customers because I want to just get a baseline. I've had so many CEOs or CROs come to me and say, our only issue is, communication or this or that.
Right.
It's like, whoa. Funny story is I did have one company that did that. I ended up, after I was done with all the interviews, I came back to the CRO/CCO and I said, do you want me to present this whole 65 page a slide deck to the CEO, or do you want me just to give him the executive? He's like, oh, no, no, no. You tell him everything. You take him through the entire 65 pages. And I was like, wow.
Oh,
Because he was one who said, our only issue is we just don't communicate well.
right.
So that's where I start because I want to get a baseline. I want to get a true assessment of the leadership team. Are they aligned? Are they committed to what they've asked me to come in and do? What's everybody saying about the employee experience and the
Yeah.
customer experience as well? And so yeah, so that's where I start. And then now, of course, now I've lost what your question was. So I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. That's really helpful. My question is like, how can you identify what specific things are you looking for that says, yeah, you've got it together, versus these are some bad practices that need to be culled? Just a couple of quick tips to give people thinking specifics of
Yeah.
what this might look like.
Yeah. So here are three questions that I ask that I love to
Hmm.
ask that will give you a really good understanding of what's happening within the organization. Culture, employee, and customer. Seriously, but it's
Hmm.
best if you have somebody, a third party, ask these questions because if you have
All right.
somebody internally, it might not go well. So my first question is, describe your culture. Keywords, doesn't have to be, anything, just give me
Hmm.
some keywords, describe your culture. Second question is, what's the glue that holds the company together? And every time I ask that, every single person says, "Oh, that's a good question."
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It is. It's a big one.
The third question is,
Yeah.
what's the unglue? What breaks it apart? And you will
Oh, I
get
like that.
so much information just out of those three questions. And, I could just ask those three questions in the interview and be done, but I ask other things. I go into specifics
Sure.
about the employee experience and the customer experience. Why do you stay? Blah, 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 those kinds of things, right? Um, but yeah, just those three questions alone, if you ask, you will get so much information, like I said, about the culture, about the employee experience, and about the customer experience. Because here's the thing, like employees get it. When it comes to customer
Sure.
experience, they get it. I love and I share this quote with all the time, and I think it's even in my last book about an employee that I interviewed who basically said, we don't have the tools, the resources, the training, policies are outdated, processes are broken to serve our customers the way they deserve to be served. words, word for word, right out of his mouth. And I was like, amen, so they get it, right? And so that's the kind of
Mhm.
information that you get just just by going out and talking to folks and just kind of getting a baseline of what's happening within the
Mhm.
organization. So
How do you get
So
them for a CEO, and particularly today when they've got all of the challenges they've had? Yes, ultimately this sits with the CEO. It always does. But how do we get them to prioritize this when it is broken? How do you make it, this is a big problem,
yeah,
it needs to be addressed? Because they might not be seeing it. If they're advertising for one person, they get hundreds of applicants, they find
yeah,
that one person that's great, they never hear anything bad about it. What they've not seen is those 399, a number of them that have had a really bad experience or done it themselves. So how do you get the CEO or the leadership team to be aware that there is a problem with the experience and to actually do
yeah.
something about it, and then make the right investment into it?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And I think a lot of them don't even know.
Yeah.
I really
Mhm.
don't think a lot of them even know. So ultimately, it has to become a metric. And I hate to add another metric to the dashboard, but it has to be a metric. It has to be, and then ultimately, it has to be tied to outcomes in some way, shape, or form too. And those outcomes are ultimately going to be productivity. It's going to be you're going to come up with what those outcomes are and how a prolonged candidate or recruiting cycle or bad experiences, what does that ultimately mean for the business going forward? And it means maybe we don't deliver when we said we were going to deliver, because we don't have the people in place, because our process, our experience is broken, and we just, so I think that's the number one way to do it. Is I think a lot of them don't know, and so there's got to be that another metric, and it's got to be tied to what are the
Yeah.
outcomes. And there's got to be a why there too. You can't just say, oh well, we got 500 resumes
Yep.
and we haven't hired anybody yet. There's
Right.
got to be some
Yeah.
reasoning there too.
So when you're working with companies, who typically brings you in, and what triggers in their organization that says we've got to get someone in? This is enough of this nonsense. Is it the CEO or head of HR, or is there something that is blown up for them? They say, all right, enough's enough.
It's either the CEO or it's somebody on the leadership team. Absolutely. 110% always. There was one year where I had 4 CROs reach out to me and say, hey,
Hmm.
we need help. So, and the one word that describes why, and it's almost always the reason, is retention, whether
Hmm.
it's employees or customers, or it's both, right? That
Yeah.
is, I would say 90% of the time, that is the reason that they reach out to me, is numbers, retention, turnover is, gone crazy. Retention
Yeah.
is down. We need help figuring out why. So yeah, absolutely.
We,
Wow.
we,
I'm thinking back to one of the last job interviews I went through, and one of the questions I asked as the candidate was, "Tell me about your employee turnover. What's the
Mm,
number look like and where it is?" And it was way over 50%, and it was a red flag, but it wasn't enough of a red flag for me not to take the job. So I went in, and within about a month, I'm like, I see why it's that high, and I had already started clocking how long till I was going to leave.
yeah,
So I think you're absolutely right that is part of the problem, but also as a result of that, I could see where it did impact our customers, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction there. So I think it is an early warning sign that if you have that high retention or high turnover number, there's something bigger and badder going on in your organization.
they,
yeah,
they brought you
definitely.
in to fix it, Jason. You asked the question and you didn't resolve it.
Right.
Annette, we've mentioned a
Exactly.
few times about AI. How do you see that impacting all of this? Do you see it improving it? Do we not
Yeah,
know yet? Because it's changing at such a fast pace. Every
it
single
is.
technology vendor has something in with AI. There's
Yeah.
new AI vendors. What's your thoughts on where it's going?
I think so purely for the moment, for the candidate experience, I think it's bad. I think it's bad. I think it's bad because you made a point earlier about you get a lot of resumes that, people just apply to every job, any job, because it's a
Sure.
job kind of thing. And yes, AI is great to just kind of root out, people who clearly aren't they're not even, this isn't even the job for them in any way, shape, or form. But beyond that, so that's a good use of AI there. The bad use of AI is everything else after that.
Right.
Because here's the thing. I think this is a statistic from PwC from many years ago, but I heard something from my other son last night, and I'll share that with you in just a second. So PwC said the more technologically advanced people or companies become, the more people want human interaction. I forget the stat was like 75% of people said
Yeah.
that, right? So I think and even in just this short window that we've had AI doing all the things that it's doing, I think people have for a moment there said, oh yay, this is fun.
Yeah.
And then went, okay, hold on a second. No, I need a human to deal with here because this is not as fun as I thought it was going to be. So, and part of that is because a lot of the AI implementations have really failed. I think they've failed in the
Yeah.
sense that we just went and did it because everybody else is doing it. And we didn't stop and say, why are we doing this? What problem will it solve for employees? What problems will it solve for customers? What problems do we have? Why do we need this? And how, and then explain that to both employees and to customers. And so last night my son says to me that the company that he works for, I'll not mention names, but they've automated, it's a restaurant, and they've automated their
Mhm.
kitchens and everything. And they've automated, you go in and you order on a screen, and everything is automated. You don't really only deal with a human when they hand you your bag with your food, right? Um, and he said, people just, the business is down. People just have said that they want to talk. They want to talk to me and say, hey, I need to customize my order, or I don't want this, or I don't want that, or I want double of this. But it's like the screen is so
Yeah.
confusing. It's, those kinds of things. And so if we start to automate everything, we lose that human touch. And as corny as it may sound, the experience is very much human, and that human touch is what we're losing with AI. Starting with the candidate experience
Yep.
because I think it was funny when, my kids are 21 and 23 now, but when they first started looking for work at 16, I was like, oh, just go walk down to the store and put in your
Yeah.
application at the store, like we did when we were kids, right? But at the store, they sent them away. They're like, go to the website, go, we don't want to talk to you. And so that's when the frustration begins. It's right there. So, and even,
Mhm.
7 years ago, it wasn't AI and they weren't automated and all that yet, but still the technology got in the way of that human interaction that is really missing in the start of the candidate experience.
That's really
Wow.
scary when you think about it as well, because
Right.
we've talked before
Yeah.
about, there's automation, there's AI enabled services, but it's for me the word's enabled,
Yeah.
and it's enabled, you bring the human in at the right point. And the world of work, if I'm going to work for someone, there is a human relationship element there.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
important, and you're so right that this is almost not saying that's not worth anything, but it's pushing it way down the line. So it's one of the last things that comes into it.
Yep.
And going back to your earlier points about culture, is you can't know anything about a culture by interacting just with technology. Or
Right.
Yeah.
is that the future? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it is tough too. I think, the human touch is so important, but it's really hard to scale. And
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
Jason, to your point, LinkedIn now on their ads or their position description, one click to apply, and suddenly it's so easy to click. And
Yeah.
congratulations, now you've got 500 applicants.
Right.
Where do you go? So at some point you have to figure out
yeah.
that conversion from tech touch
Yeah.
to human interaction.
Yeah. Yep.
This has just been such a great conversation, and I'm just could go on all day. I just love what you have to say here. So, but we always like to have a breakthrough challenge here, and so one bold question for our listeners to take
Okay.
away. So here's yours. How would your customers describe your culture if all they knew about you came from the hiring process? So if not the folks that work for you.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting question. Well, I think they would know that uh whew, that's a great question. They would know that health and fitness are important because first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna wake up in the morning and make sure everybody gets a workout in. So That would definitely be number one on the list. I think, for me, it would probably be communication is another one that's I think would be very clear. And then also loyalty, you know.
Nice.
Those are sort of, for me, those are three really strong ones in my life and my business. And I think that people have never told me that I communicate too much.
Mhm.
They've just, love that that I do, that I respond and and I'm there and I respond most of the time, respond quicker than than I probably should, but communication is huge. So I think that's it. I think
Nice.
it's health and fitness, communication, and loyalty. And loyalty being, doing all the right things, doing what you say you're going to do, those kinds of things, and really um uh, being there when people need you.
And
That's
Annette,
awesome.
this has been such a great conversation. As Jason said, this is one that we could keep talking, and I
Yeah,
think there's
agreed.
probably another episode if you join us again down the line. This is such an important conversation because this impacts everything from
Yeah.
people joining, the right people joining, how they perform, how they work, how the business ultimately performs, and then what your customers see at the end of it. So it's such a key thing to get right. Hey, Annette, before we go, please tell our listeners how they can reach you. I know you've released a new book recently.
Yep.
Just tell them a
Yeah,
bit more
shameless
about.
plug.
Thanks for listening to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. If you found today's episode useful, make sure you subscribe, check out our website at breakthroughsaasgrowth.com, and follow us on all the usual social media channels for more insights and updates. And don't forget to share this show with your colleagues who are driving growth in SaaS. See you next time.